This video is about the 1 to 4 family residential contract. This is when you are putting an offer in for a buyer. Okay, so parties, you're going to get the seller's information from the listing. Okay, so on the MLS it'll tell you who the buyer is, and you put that information here. Another thing you could do is pull up the property in the central appraisal district and see which names are listed on there, but sometimes it doesn't match. Okay, so check with the agent. You'll pull up the lot, block, and legal description of the property, also from the central appraisal district, and this is the part. So you'll pull up this information. This is the legal description in the city, county of El Paso. Right, that's where we're pretty much working. Right now, it's known as, and then their actual address. So when it says known as 331 Emerald Nook Court is just my address. Okay, but that's not the legal description. In Texas, they need the legal description. Okay. Any exclusions from the property, this means what I'm not going to sell with my property. So if I want to make sure that it's understood that there are certain things that don't come with, you know, this purchase agreement, and we know it doesn't come with, or we want them to take it out of there before we move in, we make sure we put this in here. Okay, now the sales price, you got A, B, and C. Okay, so you have cash on the top, we have financing here, and then it will auto calculate on the bottom line. So you'll have to get the letter from the lender, the pre-qual letter, and it will explain the financing piece of it. Okay, so you have cash portion, you know, maybe it's the 3.5% for FHA, or it's the 5% for a conventional, or whatever for a VA. Or if the buyer decides, you know what, I have $20,000 as a down payment, then you just go ahead and put your down payment in there. Okay, now if your total purchase price is $200,000, then the amount financed is going to be $180,000, which will give you that total of $200,000. So now how are we going to explain what this is to the other side? Typically we go with the third-party financing addendum. Okay, and that's what explains the financing. Okay, are there any leases? Are we going to do a lease back or anything like that? Now this is the difference of the new form here. Okay, must deliver to, so this is the earnest money and option money. Before it was separate. Okay, so must deliver to the title company. Okay, so you'll have the title company. So if you're the buyer, you typically get to pick the title company, but most of the times there's already title work done previous, so you kind of check the MLS and then ask if there's any title work done previously. If not, then pick your own title company. Okay, so we're just going to do Prosperous Title. I'm forgetting the address to Prosperous Title. Anyway, so you just pull up, for example, Prosperous Title, El Paso. It's 1300 Airway. Okay, so then you start typing. Must deliver to oh, you know what, I apologize, this is the escrow agent. This is when you put the name of the title rep, so it will be the name. I apologize. So as escrow agent at, and then this would be the address here. So right, so now it says address right there, and then how much is earnest money and option fee. So the first one is the earnest money. Let's just use easy numbers and say that that's $1,000. Typically in any situation, I like to put 1% of the purchase price. So in this situation, it would actually be $2,000, because we have a $200,000 purchase price up there. Okay, earnest money, do you say $100 or $50? It's typical in El Paso here. Okay, so you have 2,000, which is 1% of the purchase price. If you want your offer to be taken seriously, then you go with the 1%. Sometimes buyers do not have that much money to put down. Okay, and then earnest money, I go, if it's under $150,000, then I'll do $50. If it's over $150,000, I do 100. That's it. Now, if you want additional earnest money, so say they only have 1,000 right now, but on the first of the month they'll have an additional 1,000, you can put a different number in here to say later, you know, at this many days after the effective date of the contract, I will deliver an additional $1,000. Okay, something like that, if you wanted to do that. Now, this is to describe the option period. How many days do you want? And I'll say it typically is 7 to 10 days. I like 10 days. Now, if I want to move them faster, then I go 7 days, and that's your time to get the inspector out there. And if it's a VA loan, for sure, you need the termite inspection as well. Okay, title policy. Seller shall furnish to buyer, I like to put at seller's expense, but you can put at buyer's expense and it changes the net at the end of the day. Issued by, and this would be the title company. Okay. Will, and then this part right down here, the shortages will be amended to read shortages in area at the expense of seller. I'm representing the buyer, so of course I want the seller to pay. But it is a tough market, so some of these things can change and should change if you want your offer to stand out from everybody else. And then what you'll do is you'll just highlight, hey, notice that I put 1% of the purchase price as my earnest money. And I also said that we will pay for the title policy and the shortages and the expense of the buyer, depending on, you know, how you want to do it. You can just highlight those things. Now, the survey. When do you want the survey? I want the survey as quickly as possible. Okay, so within, let's just go, let's give them 15 days. Okay, within 15 days that of the effective date of this contract, I want to make sure that I get the survey. Sometimes they have to get a new survey, and if I need to get a new survey, I want it at the seller's expense. Again, you can put the buyer's expense. Okay, and they write no later than 3 days prior to closing date. Okay, and you have different selections that you can do here, but I typically stay with this number 1 right here. Now, objections. What we want to do is, depending on the type of purchase of the property, we want to make sure that it is for residential use. Okay, now if it doesn't come back saying that this property can be used for residential use, the buyer must object the earlier of the closing date, or I like to just go 3 days after the buyer receives the notice. If you get notified that you can't use this for residential use, how long is it going to take you to say, okay, I'm going to continue, or we need to get out of this contract? I just say 3 days. Okay, you have to determine whether the property is or is not in a property owners association, so a homeowners association. Okay, I'm just going to click not on this one. Now again, at the end of each page, you're going to have the initials. So you have the buyer's initials on this side. So if you're representing the buyer, then you got your initials here and here. So buyer 1, buyer 2. And then the seller would put their initials over here. So that's both sides acknowledging. No side for the agent to initial on this. Okay. Again, read all the way through the form so that you know what each one is, highlighting the things that make sense for that property. This one's just a quick one on how to fill out the form. Okay, so this is for the seller's disclosure. Now, sometimes it comes as documents, additional documents on the MLS, and then you can say, well, the buyer has already received the notice because it's already public. And if the buyer has not received the notice, we want within 3 days after the effective date of the contract, seller shall deliver the notice to the buyer. If buyer does not receive the notice, buyer may terminate the contract at any time prior to closing, and the earnest money will be refunded to the buyer. Okay? Depending on if there's, you know, seller is not required to furnish the notice under the Texas Property Code. So sometimes in new construction, there's no need for a seller's disclosure, or if, let's say, the property has been vacant for such a long time and the seller is out of state, then they just may not know what is wrong with the property, so they will not be required to furnish a seller's disclosure. Okay. Now, here's an interesting part. Okay. So the buyer accepts the property as is, or buyer accepts the property as is, provided the seller do these certain things to the house. Okay. So when you go through the house and you're showing it, you may notice some things that you want to get fixed. Now, these things, I would say, if they are very obvious, when you walk through, there's a giant hole in the wall, you're going to want to make sure to write, fix the giant hole in the wall. Okay. If you don't write it, then they'll go, well, you saw it when you came through and you selected as is. So the property is as is. Get it? Now, if it's something smaller where you may not notice it right away, it's okay to write buyer accepts the property as is, and then after the inspection, you do an amendment requiring repairs. Okay? And then that's where you ask for it. So typically it's buyer accepts the property as is, or you go accept the property as is provided you do these, couple of things. I remember one house, something that I put in here was paint the entire house, a neutral color, and then also the entire downstairs had the farmhouse shutters. So I asked them to put in shutters upstairs because there were no shutters upstairs, and we got both of those things because they accepted the contract and those were written in here. Okay. Now remember, it is a difficult market, and so the more you're asking for, the less desirable your contract is going to look like. Okay. Next paragraph is the residential service contract. So these are home warranty companies. Okay. So if you go out and research a home warranty company that you really like, you'll know what each of the prices are. So I can tell you that for First American Home Warranty, the warranty for houses up to 5,000 square feet, something like that. Any typical house is going to be fine. So houses up to 5,000 square feet, to include appliances, that's an additional cost. It is $620. So I know that, and this is me asking for the seller to give me $620 for a home warranty. That'll be done at closing. Okay. Now this is if you are the agent in the transaction. So if you have an ownership in the property, then you need to notify. This is where you pick the closing date. So whatever date, typically we're at like 45 days out. So it's April 1st. We've got 30 days here. And so we're looking at the 15th. Now the 15th is on a Saturday. We know title company's not going to be open on a Saturday. I'm not a big fan of doing anything on Monday, but Monday is okay. I'm also not a fan of doing it on Friday, because sometimes if you get an appointment late in the evening on Friday, then you won't get keys until Monday, so you can't use the weekend to move in. Okay? So if you pick a Friday, make sure it's in the morning. Also be advised of holidays and things like that, so you just need to know your title company. Okay? And if during the process that you see that there's going to be an issue, then you can do an amendment to extend the closing date. Okay? So we'll just do the 17th. You know what? Let's do the 13th, and let's get on our lenders and tell them hurry up. Okay. Possession, buyer's possession is upon closing and funding. Okay. Or you can do this one is according to a temporary residential lease. Okay. So if they want to get in early, say that property is vacant when they purchase it, then they will do according to a lease and they'll get in early. Special provisions, I want you to make sure that you just read about special provisions and what to put in there. Now this is when you're going to ask for closing costs from the seller. Okay? Closing costs from the seller never should exceed 3% in a normal market. Okay? And for VA loans, probably 2%. Get with your lender to just get that those numbers, how much they need to close the deal. Now in this market, probably going to be 0 in order for your contract to be, or your offer to be accepted. Okay, so this is explaining a bunch of different things. Again, read all the way through this. You're going to put the information of the buyer over here and the seller over here. What other types of things are we going to put in here? So third-party financing addendum. Sometimes we're going to need for a sale of another property. Sometimes we have a buyer's residential lease. You're just going to put all of those things in here. Sometimes we want to do a non-realty items addendum. And so then we'll go over here and we'll have to type it in, non-realty items addendum. Okay, that's when you want to make sure that you get the refrigerator. Okay, because the refrigerator is not included in the purchase of a property. So you want to do a non-realty items addendum, and then you'll ask for the refrigerator. I don't put anything in here for the attorney unless I'm notified that there is an attorney. Okay, so you have the buyers sign, and then this date will be filled in by whoever is the last to sign. So if you send it to them and they agree to everything, they'll sign and they'll put this date and send it to title company. This is the information on the different brokers. And then this is where you put your commission. So you expect 3% commission. Looks like we're now having to put in the percentage. Okay, so it looks like we're having to be a little bit more specific on that one. Now these are just receipts. These are filled out by the title company. So you'll get the option receipt and the earnest money receipt. Okay, and that's it.